shoved a royal guard to the ground. What happened next changed how everyone saw power. Let me take you back to a cold, tense morning at Buckingham Palace, a place where tradition stands like stone and silence speaks louder than words. At the center of it all stood Corporal Jason Miller, 34 years old, unmoving in his red tunic, rifle by his side. He wasn't just a ceremonial figure. He was a soldier, forged in combat zones, trained in patience and purpose. Then, out of nowhere, the stillness was shattered. A biker roared into the courtyard. His name? Derek "Iron Jack" Walsh. 6'4", 260 pounds of raw arrogance, leather patches, and hate. He wasn't there for a tour. He came to dominate, to mock, to challenge everything that uniform stood for. He circled Jason like a wolf, snarling insults. He shoved him, hard. Jason fell. Gasps erupted. Phones dropped. The biker raised his fists, smiling like he'd won. But here's the twist. Jason got back up. Calm, measured, dead silent. He adjusted his cap, stepped forward, placed a gloved hand on Derek's shoulder, and in a blink, the man who thought he understood power was on his back, pinned to the stone by a single boot. Jason didn't yell. He didn't celebrate. He simply said, "Real power doesn't need an audience." That was the moment everything changed. In 2 seconds, the uniform he wore stopped being a symbol and became a lesson, a reminder that discipline beats ego. Stillness can be stronger than rage, and some lines should never be crossed, because when they are, the quietest man in the room might just be the one you'll never forget. It was a cold morning outside Buckingham Palace. The kind of cold that creeps into your sleeves, makes you pull your coat tighter, and draws steam from your breath. Tourists gathered behind the gates, some holding coffee, others raising their phones, all waiting for the changing of the guard. But what none of them knew was that today, something entirely different was about to happen. Standing tall and completely still near the main courtyard was Corporal Jason Miller, a 34-year-old Royal Guard. His red tunic was spotless, brass buttons gleaming in the pale London sunlight. Beneath the tall bearskin hat, Jason's face was unreadable. Not because he didn't feel the cold or hear the noise, but because he'd been trained not to react, ever. 8 years of service, including tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, had turned him into a master of stillness, control, and composure. Jason wasn't just playing a ceremonial role. He was a soldier, and he understood what his uniform meant, not just to the tourists, but to the country he swore to protect. Then came the sound. A low, aggressive growl in the distance. It wasn't the hum of a passing taxi or the quiet putter of a rental scooter. This was something else. A motorcycle, modified, loud, angry. People turned to look as the noise grew louder, ripping through the calm like a blade. Within seconds, a jet-black motorcycle screeched to a halt near the palace gates. Chrome skulls were mounted on the handlebars. The gas tank was covered in twisted Viking runes, symbols that had long since been hijacked by hate groups. The rider swung off his bike with a heavy thud. Derek "Iron Jack" Walsh, 48 years old, 6'4", 260 pounds of muscle and swagger. His leather jacket barely closed across his barrel chest, and on it were patches and insignias that made veterans in the crowd uneasy. One symbol, a crude iron cross, hung from his neck, not a real medal, but a cheap replica. An insult, not an honor. Derek wasn't here to sightsee. He paced slowly toward the guard, cracking his knuckles, his boots clapping against the old stone. He looked around at the tourists and smirked. "You know what I see when I look at this place?" he shouted, waving a gloved hand toward the castle walls. "I see weakness. Old traditions, fake power, guys in red coats playing soldier while the real men live free." He moved closer to Corporal Miller, circling him like a shark. His shadow stretched across Jason's boots like a storm cloud. "Hey, toy soldier," he barked. "I'm talking to you." Jason didn't move. Didn't flinch, didn't even blink. Years of training kicked in. He kept his eyes fixed straight ahead, his posture perfect. But inside, every instinct was awake. His breathing stayed calm. His hands relaxed, but he noticed the weight shift in Derek's feet, the tension in the man's shoulders, the slight tightening of his jaw. Jason had seen that look before, in war zones, just before a man did something stupid. The crowd was growing tense. A mother pulled her children behind a stone pillar. An elderly couple, both military veterans, watched from a bench. The older man leaned forward, eyes narrowing. He'd seen this too. Trouble was coming. "You just stand there, huh?" Derek sneered. "All dressed up, following orders. You call that strength?" "You don't know the first thing about it." But what Derek didn't understand was this. Real strength doesn't need to prove itself. Jason Miller stood still, not out of fear, but out of principle. And that stillness was about to be tested in a way no one saw coming. Derek Iron Jack Walsh wasn't used to being ignored. In his world, people either backed down or stepped aside. He'd built his identity around being the loudest, the strongest, the one you didn't mess with. But this man, the one in the red coat, standing like a statue in the middle of Buckingham Palace, wasn't moving, wasn't even blinking. And that silence, it was starting to get under Derek's skin. He took another step forward, closing the gap until he was just inches away from Corporal Jason Miller's face. The biker's breath came out in short, heated bursts, fogging slightly in the cold air. "You deaf soldier boy," Derek growled. "I'm talking to you. You just gonna stand there like some wind-up doll?" Still, Jason remained steady. His grip on the rifle didn't tighten, his eyes didn't flinch, but inside every nerve was alert. He could feel Derek's weight shift again, like a bull pawing at the dirt before a charge. Jason knew this type. Aggression wrapped in insecurity. A walking time bomb with no off switch. The tourists around them had gone quiet. A few had their phones raised, filming with shaky hands. Others stepped back, pulling their children with them. One young boy asked his mother, "Is he allowed to do that?" She didn't answer. The elderly veteran on the bench hadn't taken his eyes off the scene. His jaw tightened. His wife gently placed her hand on his knee, wordless understanding between two people who'd seen what rage looks like before it explodes. "You're what's wrong with the world," Derek continued, his voice rising. hiding behind rules and ceremony, pretending that your silence means strength. But real power doesn't stand still. It acts. He waved a thick arm toward the crowd. Look at all of them, filming, whispering, hoping you'll do something. But you won't, will you? Because you can't. You're just a prop. Jason still didn't move, but internally his mind calculated every detail: Derek's stance, the way his fingers flexed, the twitch in his left shoulder. Combat instinct ran through him like electricity. Then Derek started to circle him, slowly, like a predator. I've been in fights that would make you cry for your mama, he said. I've cracked skulls in back alleys, laid out men twice your size. I don't follow rules. I break them. You think this little costume makes you a warrior? Jason's breath remained slow, controlled, measured. He could feel the tension in the air sharpen, like a rubber band stretched to its limit. Derek stopped directly behind him now. You hear that? He whispered near Jason's ear. That's the sound of no one coming to help you. You're alone out here, soldier boy. Still nothing. But that wasn't weakness. That was control. The kind that comes from real experience, not bar fights or bragging rights, but fire and gunpowder. From watching comrades fall and standing when others ran, Derek stepped back around to face him. You think this uniform makes you untouchable? He spat. Let's test that. He cracked his knuckles loudly, once, twice. The sound echoed off the palace stone like a warning shot. Jason didn't blink. Didn't break. But he was ready, a shift in the wind. The weight of a crowd, the slight metallic click of a phone recording. Everything was in place. And just as Derek squared his shoulders and leaned in, Jason's eyes moved. Just once. A flicker. A signal. It wasn't fear, it was recognition. Recognition of the exact moment when words would no longer matter and action would be the only answer left. And that moment was seconds away. Derek Walsh didn't ask for permission. He never had, and in that moment, high on pride and desperate for control, he wasn't about to start. With a grunt and a sudden lurch of motion, he shoved both hands hard into Corporal Jason Miller's chest. The force of it was brutal, fueled by years of street fights, bar brawls, and unchecked ego. His thick arms extended fully as he poured all of that frustration, at the silence, at the stillness, at everything he didn't understand, into a single violent move. Jason's boots scraped against the ancient stone courtyard. The sharp screech of metal heel plates echoed through the air as he struggled for balance. His ceremonial rifle tilted. For a split second, the image of composure wavered, his polished figure bending, swaying. Then came the fall. It wasn't slow. It wasn't staged. It was real. Jason hit the ground with a heavy thud. His back slammed against the stone, the sound reverberating off the palace walls. The rifle clattered beside him. His cap slipped just slightly, revealing short brown hair, damp with cold sweat. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Someone screamed. A child started to cry. Phones dropped to people's sides. The tension snapped. And Derek? He lifted his arms into the air like a prize fighter at the end of a match. "That's what I thought," he roared. "All bark, no bite." The thick silver chain around his neck swung wildly with his celebration, the cheap iron cross pendant flashing in the morning sun. His leather jacket stretched at the seams, the symbols of hate and violence stitched across the back, now amplified by what he thought was victory. Tourists began backing away fast. A young woman ducked behind a nearby bench. The two elderly veterans near the edge of the scene stood frozen, one gripping the arm of the other, faces tight with a pain that came not from surprise, but from memory. "Look at your hero now," Derek bellowed, "flat on his back, just like the rest of them." But what Derek didn't realize, what men like him never realized, was that real power doesn't come from the first strike. It comes from what you do after you've been hit. And Jason Miller? He was far from done. He lay still for exactly 3 seconds. Long enough for the biker to believe he'd won. Long enough for the crowd to fall silent. And then he moved. Not with drama, not with rage, with purpose. His gloved hand reached for his cap, adjusting it back into perfect alignment. His other hand gripped the rifle, checked it quickly for damage, then set it down gently beside him. Then, with the control of a man trained in both war and discipline, Jason stood. Every movement was deliberate, calculated, grounded. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't know what to do. But something changed in the air. A shift. Like the pause before a thunderclap. Derek's smile faltered. Jason stepped forward and placed one white-gloved hand firmly on the biker's shoulder. It wasn't loud. It wasn't fast. But it was final. Derek tried to shrug it off, tried to laugh, but his body betrayed him. Jason's fingers found a pressure point under the collarbone, pressing in with surgical precision. The smirk vanished from Derek's face. "What the?" he started to say, but the words dissolved into a strained grunt. Jason didn't yell. He didn't say a word. Instead, he pivoted, using Derek's own size and motion against him. And before the biker could understand what was happening, he was off the ground. For the first time that morning, Derek Walsh flew. His body arced over Jason's hip, airborne for a split second that felt like eternity. Then, crash. His back hit the stone harder than Jason's ever had. The same stones he'd mocked. The same ground he'd tried to own. The crowd gasped again, and this time no one clapped, because this wasn't a show. This was a lesson. Derek Walsh hit the ground like a dropped engine block. The air rushed from his lungs in a guttural exhale, his victory howl replaced by a stunned gasp. He rolled once, trying to push himself up, only to find a polished black boot pressing firmly against his chest. It wasn't crushing. Not yet. But it was commanding, controlling. A boot that didn't need to stomp to deliver a message. Jason Miller stood above him, his face calm, unreadable. He wasn't angry. He wasn't shaking. There was no shouting, no triumphant pose. Just a man who had done what needed to be done, and was ready for more, if required. "Real power," he said, his voice low and even, "doesn't need an audience." Derek grunted, trying to twist free. His thick arms flexed beneath the boot, but it didn't budge. Each attempt to break the hold only made things worse, tightening the pressure, increasing the humiliation. Sweat trickled down the biker's shaved head, collecting at his temple. His leather jacket, once a symbol of rebellion, now looked like dead weight dragging him down. "You can't hold me like this," he snapped, though his voice had lost its edge. This is assault!" Jason didn't flinch. "You assaulted me," he said simply, "and now I'm restraining you." Tourists watched in stunned silence. Phones hovered in the air, recording every second, but no one dared speak. They weren't watching a fight anymore. They were witnessing a shift in power. The biker's fingers clawed at the stone. "Get off me!" Jason tilted his head slightly, pressing his foot just enough to make the point. "You wanted to test the uniform," he said. "You thought silence was weakness." That control was cowardice, but let me tell you something. His eyes narrowed, not with rage, but with precision. This uniform doesn't just stand for tradition. It stands for discipline, for resolve, for people who know when to act and when to wait. He shifted his boot to a pressure point just below Derek's collarbone. The biker flinched, groaning through clenched teeth. "Real strength," Jason continued, "doesn't throw the first punch. It ends the last one." Derek writhed, panting now, unable to find leverage. His chest heaved under the weight of the guard's calm authority. All the tattoos, the symbols, the growling threats, they meant nothing now. They were props. Costumes, and the man he had mocked for wearing a uniform, he was real. More real than anything Derek had ever faced in his life. "Can't move, can you?" Jason asked, voice still quiet, still calm. Derek looked up, red-faced and furious. "You're dead when my guys see this video," he hissed. "You don't know who I am." Jason leaned in slightly, just enough for the crowd to hear his reply. "I don't care who you are. I care what you did, and more importantly, what you didn't do." He removed the boot slowly, standing tall again as the police began to approach from across the courtyard. Still, his posture remained perfect. His chin high, shoulders back, eyes forward. Derek scrambled to his knees, still trying to reclaim some version of control. "You'll pay for this," he snarled. Jason didn't respond. Because there was nothing left to say. The sound of approaching sirens echoed off the palace walls, growing louder with each passing second. The biker's breathing was ragged. His pride crushed beneath more than just a boot. Jason adjusted his gloves, picked up his rifle from the stone, and returned to his post like nothing had happened. Because for him, it hadn't been a fight. It had been duty. The sirens finally stopped at the gates of Buckingham Palace. Two Metropolitan Police officers stepped into the courtyard, calm, professional, not in a hurry. They didn't need to be. The situation had already been handled by a man in a red tunic and white gloves, without a single raised voice or unnecessary move. Derek Walsh, still on his knees, was panting like a man who had run a marathon. His breath came in sharp bursts. His face, once smug, once confident, was pale and sweating. His leather jacket clung to him, no longer a symbol of rebellion, but of recklessness. His patches, once meant to intimidate, now hung crooked and dirt-streaked. The iron cross around his neck had cracked. Literally, The cheap metal split where it had struck the stone. "Sir," one officer said firmly, already pulling out a pair of cuffs.
"You're being placed under arrest for assaulting a member of Her Majesty's Royal Guard. Please stand up." "I didn't assault. He... Derek stammered, still gasping, still stunned. But the words wouldn't land.
They sounded hollow now, weak, even he could hear it. "Don't resist," the second officer said sharply. "We have multiple witnesses and video evidence." From behind them, an older man in a dark blue blazer approached. The Royal Marine veteran who'd watched everything unfold. His campaign medals glinted faintly in the morning sun. He stepped beside the officers and gave a single respectful nod to Corporal Jason Miller. Jason acknowledged it with the smallest motion, just a tightening of posture, a fraction of a glance. But for military men, that was enough. The exchange spoke volumes. Derek was pulled to his feet, wincing from the pain of the takedown and the pressure point lock he still didn't understand. He tried to yank one arm free, but the officers were already locking the cuffs in place. "This ain't over," he muttered, his voice lower now, almost a whisper. The veteran leaned in, his voice steady. "Oh, it's over. It was over the moment you thought discipline was weakness." They led Derek toward the gates, past dozens of silent tourists. Some held up phones. Others simply stared. No one spoke. As the officers disappeared with the biker in tow, the quiet filled the courtyard once again. Not just silence, but respectful silence. A different kind of hush. The kind that settles over a crowd after they've witnessed something real. Jason, meanwhile, stood at attention. His rifle reset. His uniform, though tested, remained crisp. The only evidence of the incident was a light scuff mark on his glove and a slightly disheveled cap that he calmly adjusted back into perfect position. To the casual visitor, he looked exactly the same as before. But to those who had seen what happened, there was no mistaking the truth. This wasn't just a ceremonial guard. This was a soldier, a man who had stood the line, not with violence but with control, who had endured a shove to the ground and responded not with rage, but with trained restraint, who had let the attacker expose himself first, then dismantled him with precise legal force, and then went back to his post. Because for Jason Miller, it was never about revenge. It was about duty. One small boy walked up to the barricade holding his mother's hand. He stared at the guard wide-eyed, then whispered, "Is he okay?" The mother nodded slowly. "He's more than okay, sweetheart. He's what real strength looks like." And the boy waved. Jason didn't move. He wasn't supposed to, but deep behind the stillness, behind the stone discipline, something changed. A shift in the crowd's energy. A deep respect. A story that would be told again and again. Not about the man who shoved a guard, but about the man who didn't need to shove back. What would you have done if you were standing there that morning, watching a man mock tradition, challenge discipline, and push a royal guard to the ground? Would you have expected silence to win? Or believed that real strength could come without shouting? This story wasn't just about a biker and a guard. It was about two different ideas of power. One built on show, the other forged through sacrifice. And in the end, we all saw which one stood tall. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed someone underestimate calm professionalism, only to be humbled by it? Have you ever been in a moment where restraint was harder, but more powerful than reaction? Whether you're watching from the UK, the US, or anywhere in the world, your voice matters. Share your take in the comments below. What does real strength look like to you? And do you believe honor still has a place in today's loud, chaotic world? Let's open up the conversation. We read every comment, and your insight could be the spark that inspires someone else. So, tell us, what part of this story hit you the hardest? We're listening.